Welcome to the 700 Club, and thanks so much for joining with us. Again, we go back to Israel. Israelis were met with a terror attack outside Jerusalem this morning. Missiles were fired at a city on the Red Sea, and the conflict on the northern border has escalated.
Meanwhile, Israel's parliament has voted no to efforts forcing them to accept a Palestinian state. CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl has more.
The Knesset overwhelmingly backed Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's statement that Israel rejects international attempts to impose a Palestinian state.
The people of Israel and their elected representatives are united today as never before. Such an attempt will only endanger Israel and will prevent the genuine peace that we all seek.
Israel came under attack on multiple fronts Thursday morning. Aerial defenses intercepted a suspected Houthi missile launch heading for the Red Sea city of Eilat before it entered Israeli territory. And outside Jerusalem, 3 terrorists with automatic weapons fired on vehicles stuck in traffic at the main checkpoint into the city, killing 1 and wounding 13 others. Civilians shot and killed 2 terrorists at the scene, and security forces arrested the 3rd. And an anti-tank missile from Lebanon made a direct hit on a home in northern Israel. No injuries were reported. In Gaza, War Cabinet Minister Benny Gantz says the operation in Rafah will begin after the population is evacuated and will continue during the Islamic holy month of Ramadan if there's not an outline for releasing the hostages. The war in Israel is fueling a global rise in anti-Semitism, especially on U.S. college campuses. A yet-to-be-released study by the Simon Wiesenthal Center of nearly 30 universities shows a free pass to promoting a pro-Hamas, anti-Zionist agenda.
Jewish students need to demand and should get just equal treatment to everyone else. Every other group is quote-unquote protected, and they should be.
Rabbi Abraham Cooper says anti-Israel forces off campus are creating a poisonous atmosphere.
Going to the streets, blocking airport entrances, and generally driving a narrative that now focuses on the Gazans who are in the middle of the firefight, of course, only placed in danger because of Hamas, but with Israel no longer able to push the concerns over American and Israeli hostages still being held by Hamas.
Meanwhile, the Association of Rape Crisis Centers in Israel submitted a report to the UN documenting brutal, intentional, and widespread sexual violence by Hamas during the October 7th massacre. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Now is the time to stand with Israel. I encourage you to call your senator, your representative in Congress, to let them know how you feel, to let them know that we need to pass an aid package for Israel. We need to make sure that there isn't a call right now for some kind of Palestinian state. All they would do is wage more war against Israel and try to disrupt her security. Israel has an absolute right to self-defense, and if you're concerned about the citizens in Gaza, be concerned about Hamas. Hamas is the reason they're under attack by Israel. Hamas took hostages. Hamas raped people. Hamas mutilated people. This has to stop, and it should never, ever happen again. Hamas has pledged to do it again and again and again until there is no more Israel. We need to stand with her. Let your senator know. Let your senators know. Let your congressman know. Let's get behind Israel. So there's the Capitol Hill switchboard. You can call it right now, 202-224-3121. Let your voice be heard that we need to stand with Israel. Well, in other news, President Biden is considering major changes to stop the flood of migrants crossing the southern border. And I just have to comment here, it's just amazing to me that he's finally awakened to it. We've been saying for years now that there's a crisis on the border, and you're talking 2 million, 3 million people a year crossing illegally. And where's the administration on that? And where's the action on that? As president, as commander-in-chief, he has the ability to protect our borders and to somehow say, well, you know, it's the fault of the Republicans in Congress. They're not passing a bill that I want. Well, I remind him he's had control of the Congress and Senate from January 2021 to January 2023. And in that period of time, they didn't do anything. So it's amazing to me to see in an election year this now becoming a Democrat issue. But it's about time. The flood of migrants illegally into our country has been overwhelming, and it's overwhelming social services in every major city in our country. It needs to stop. Ephraim Graham has that story and more from the CBN Newsroom. Ephraim?
Gordon, there are reports the president might take executive action to crack down on migrant crossings. He's said to be looking at a wide range of options to restrict asylum seekers. The administration says he has the authority under a section of law used by former President Donald Trump to enforce border security. President Biden reversed many of those policies when he took office. The border crisis is now a major election issue. Under the Biden administration, Border Patrol agents have taken more than 6 million migrants into custody at the southern border. It's released more than 2.3 million into the country. We're learning more on the Alabama Supreme Court ruling that declared frozen embryos are children. A major medical center in the state has put in vitro fertilization procedures on hold as it examines the ruling's impact. The pro-life movement is also weighing in on the ruling's effect on its efforts to limit abortion. Mark Martin has this story.
The Alabama Supreme Court's decision is unprecedented. The justices ruled that under state law, frozen embryos qualify as people, stating unborn children are children without exception based on developmental stage.
We're concerned that this ruling has far-reaching consequences for what we feel is safe to freeze and safe to discard.
The court's decision could hinder patients' access to fertility treatments. The justices found 3 couples can sue for wrongful death after their embryos were accidentally destroyed. The president of the Alabama Pro-Life Coalition says the court got it right.
I think they did, and I think most of the pro-life community would agree that that is a correct decision. It's something that it has been discussed from time to time, but this issue is really a new issue. It's something, as I said, different from abortion, and it's much more complicated than abortion. But we do have to respect life and the way life is created, and that's exactly what these embryos do.
The CEO of Americans United for Life says the decision strengthens the personhood movement, which says unborn children should be granted legal rights starting at conception.
I think it definitely advances the cause of the personhood movement with the understanding that preborn humans in vitro or ex vitro are due the benefit of life for sure.
Liberty Counsel's Matt Stavers said the nonprofit law firm is using the Alabama court's ruling in a similar case, arguing that Florida's constitution, like Alabama's, affirms that an unborn child qualifies as a human life, a human being, and a person.
This is a very significant case, and we actually have notified the Florida Supreme Court of this decision because of another major case pending in Florida at the High Court there with regards to abortion on the ballot potentially in November.
Alabama's largest hospital put on hold in vitro fertilization treatments Wednesday, saying it must determine the risk to patients or doctors of potential criminal charges or punitive damages. Mark Martin, CBN News.
Student loan forgiveness could be on the way for more than 150,000 people as part of a Biden administration push to cancel student debt. And it comes after the Supreme Court ruled against its first attempt last summer. The latest proposal targets specific borrowers. The White House plans to send an email to 153,000 people informing them they qualify for student loan forgiveness, canceling $1.2 billion in debt, bringing total student debt relief to $138 billion for 3.9 million borrowers. The average cost of college education has nearly tripled in the past 4 decades, and there's no sign it's slowing down. As the White House works to forgive loans on the back end, House Republicans say they have a solution to stop students from getting priced out in the first place. Capitol Hill correspondent Matt Galka reports.
Last year, the average annual cost of a public four-year university hit almost $11,000 for in-state students. It jumps to about $28,000 if you're out of state. North Carolina Republican Virginia Fox says it's out of control.
I want to preserve in this country the opportunity for people to get a good education and work hard and succeed.
Fox's College Cost Reduction Act aims to lower costs by shifting some of the student debt to the institutions.
Colleges have no incentive whatsoever to hold down the cost of getting an education because Congress has appropriated more and more money and the colleges raise their tuition in accordance with that. And what we want to do is have the colleges have skin in the game.
The bill would lower how much students could borrow on the front end for school. It would also put colleges on the hook for loan repayments if a student failed to pay their debts, while also changing funding for schools based on student outcomes. Fox calls the plan better than the attempted loan cancellation by the Biden administration.
The students take unsustainable debt and then they can't pay it back, and then the taxpayers go on the hook for it. And under the Biden administration, they're accelerating that process by trying to transfer the debt that students have accrued themselves to the taxpayers. That is wrong.
Some higher education groups raise concerns that schools have no control over how students perform in the labor market and shouldn't be held responsible for failed loan repayments. Democrats argue that limiting federal student loans would force students into the private student loan market.
But on balance, the havoc that this bill would wreak in our higher education system and the pain it would inflict on students and families far outweigh any minor improvements the bill may make.
Colleges and universities don't want anything to change. They've got a gravy train right now, and they'd like everything to stay the way it is. We want them to be accountable.
The House Education Committee approved the bill along party lines, and it now awaits a date on the House floor. Matt Gelka, CBN News.
Certainly one to watch. Gordon?
It is one to watch, and it's one to watch for a variety of reasons because it really will affect the private universities and colleges in the United States of America. If you know admitting a student is going to potentially put you on the hook to repay their loans, well, then you're not going to admit them. And suddenly you have universities, colleges, having credit departments to analyze the credit history of incoming students and their families and their ability to repay that loan. In my view, that should properly be on financial institutions. They're geared for that. They have that history. They know that business, and they're the ones making the loan. The problem here is the federal government has guaranteed the student loan, and that's what put the taxpayers on the hook. If you switch that to the educational institution, you're going to have unintended consequences. And here's one of the biggest ones. You're going to essentially stop liberal education in America. Do you really want a university giving an English degree to someone and then saying, well, an English degree isn't going to get you a job in the marketplace, therefore we're not going to have English programs anymore, we're not going to have theater programs anymore, we're not going to have art programs anymore, we're not going to have philosophy programs anymore, we're not going to have ancient language programs anymore, because none of these produce income in a job market. That is a mistake, and it shouldn't happen. The risk for paying the loan should be on the lender, not on the institution, and I would say not on the federal government. The reason the price has gone up is the federal government got involved and created an incentive for loans. That in turn drove the prices up. It's a classic problem. When the government stimulates a particular activity, it throws the market out of whack. And instead of the market being based on ability to pay and tuition that can be afforded, it's based on what the federal government can afford, and that's a completely different equation.